The shuttle broke through the purple clouds and Daniel Cole pressed his face against the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. The planet below was nothing like Earth. Crystal spires rose from the ground like frozen lightning, and rivers of glowing amber liquid cut through forests of black trees. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Daniel was 38 years old and had seen more violence than most humans would see in 10 lifetimes. He had scars on his chest and back and arms from battles that still visited him in his dreams. But he was not here to fight. He was here to talk. The United Earth Council had sent him as their ambassador to the Eye, and species that had just discovered faster-than-light travel. First contact had happened 6 months ago, and now it was time to make friends. Laura sat beside him, checking her weapon for the 100th time. She was his security chief, a woman with short red hair and eyes that never stopped moving. Behind them sat Price, the team medic, a young man with gentle hands and a calm voice that could soothe the dying. "You really think they want peace?" Laura asked without looking up from her gun. Daniel shrugged. "They invited us, that is a good start." The shuttle landed on a platform made of the same crystal that seemed to cover everything on this world. Daniel stepped out first and felt the warm air wrap around him like a blanket. It smelled sweet, like honey mixed with something he could not name. The I delegation was waiting for them. Daniel had studied their species for months, but seeing them in person was different. They stood on 4 legs and had 2 arms that ended in clawed hands. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that shimmered in shades of gold and brown. Their heads were angular with large compound eyes that reflected everything like mirrors. They were taller than humans by at least a foot and looked like they could tear a man apart without trying. One of them stepped forward. This one was different. Her shell was darker, almost bronze, and she wore a crown of woven crystal on her head. Queen. Daniel had memorized her face from the briefing files. "Welcome to humans," she said. Her voice was clicking and buzzing, but the translator in Daniel's ear turned it into smooth English. "I am Queen of the Amber Hive. You honor us with your presence." Daniel bowed his head in the way he had been taught. "Queen, I am Daniel Cole. Earth thanks you for this invitation. We come in peace and hope to leave as friends." The Queen's mandibles clicked in what Daniel hoped was a smile. "Come, we have prepared chambers for you in the palace. Tonight we feast. Tomorrow we talk of treaties." They walked through streets of crystal and stone. Citizens stopped to watch them pass. Daniel heard clicking and buzzing all around him, whispers in a language his translator struggled to catch. He saw fear in some of those mirrored eyes, curiosity in others, and in some he saw something that looked very much like hatred. Laura moved closer to him. "I do not like this," she whispered. "Too many guards, and some of them are wearing different colors." Daniel had noticed it too. Most of the guards wore amber sashes around their midsections, matching their queen, but scattered among them were others wearing deep red. He had read about this in the briefings. The Eye were not united. They were divided into hives, each with their own queen, their own territory, their own agenda. The Crimson Hive was the largest rival to the Amber Hive, and they did not want humans on their planet. The palace rose before them like a mountain of frozen light. It was the most beautiful building Daniel had ever seen. Towers of crystal reached toward the purple sky, and bridges of amber connected them like spider webs. Inside, the walls glowed with soft light, and the floors were polished so smooth that Daniel could see his own reflection looking up at him. Queen led them personally to their chambers. This was unusual, Daniel knew. A queen doing servant work was unheard of in Eye culture. She was making a statement. "You are tired from your journey," she said. "Rest now. I will send for you when the feast is ready." Daniel thanked her and watched her leave. When the doors closed, Laura immediately began checking the room for listening devices and hidden dangers. Sat down on one of the strange eye beds, which looked more like a nest than anything else. "She seems nice," said, "for a giant bug queen." Laura shot him a look that could have melted steel. "Stay focused. We are not here to make friends. We are here to survive long enough to sign a treaty." Daniel walked to the window and looked out at the alien city. Somewhere out there, enemies were planning. He could feel it in his bones, the same instinct that had kept him alive through a dozen wars. Something bad was coming. He thought about his sister. She had been 17 when the colony on New Bristol was attacked. He had been a Marine stationed 3 systems away, too far to help. By the time he got there, she was gone, buried under rubble and ash and broken promises. He had sworn on her grave that he would never let another innocent die if he could stop it. That was why he had become a diplomat. Bullets and bombs could not save the galaxy. Only words could do that. Only understanding. Only peace. A knock came at the door. A eye servant entered carrying trays of food. Daniel watched the creature carefully. It wore an amber sash, loyal to the queen. But its movements were strange, too stiff, too careful. It placed the food on the table and left without a word. Laura picked up a piece of the food and sniffed it. "I will test it first." "We have ration packs," said. "Maybe we should stick to those." Daniel shook his head. "Refusing their food is an insult. We eat what they give us. We smile. We say thank you. That is how peace is made." He picked up something that looked like a fruit and took a bite. It was than anything he had ever tasted. He smiled and chewed and swallowed, hoping it was not poison. Hours passed. The purple sky turned dark and stars appeared, strange constellations that Daniel did not recognize. Finally, guards came to escort them to the feast. Daniel straightened his uniform, touched the scars on his chest through the fabric, and walked out to meet whatever fate was waiting for him. The great chamber was filled with nobles and warriors. Hundreds of mirrored eyes turned to watch the humans enter. Daniel kept his head high and his shoulders back. He was not afraid. He had faced death too many times to fear it now. Queen sat on a throne of crystal at the head of the room. She raised one clawed hand and the chamber fell silent. "Tonight we welcome our guests from Earth," she said. "Let this be the first night of a new era. Let this be the night when I and human became family." Daniel took his seat at the table of honor. He looked around the room at all the watching eyes. Some were friendly, some were not. And somewhere in the shadows, red sashes moved in the darkness, waiting for their moment to strike. He did not know it yet, but before this night was over, he would bleed more than he had ever bled before. And every drop of that blood would buy something precious, something the galaxy had never seen, a bond between species that would change everything. But that was still hours away. For now, he smiled and raised his glass and pretended that everything was fine. The feast lasted for hours. Strange music filled the air, sounds that rose and fell like waves on an alien ocean. Daniel ate and drank and smiled until his face hurt. The eyes seemed pleased with their human guests. Queen laughed at his jokes even when they did not translate well. It felt almost normal, almost safe. But Daniel never stopped watching. He counted the guards. He measured the distance to every exit. He noticed when the red sashes moved and where they went. Laura was doing the same thing beside him. Their eyes met across the table and she gave him a small nod. She saw it too. Something was wrong. The feast ended near midnight. Queen announced that the treaty signing would happen the next morning in the great chamber. The nobles bowed and filed out. The humans were escorted back to their rooms. Daniel lay awake for a long time, staring at the glowing ceiling, listening to the strange sounds of an alien night. Morning came with purple light streaming through crystal windows. Daniel dressed in his formal uniform, the one with all his medals pinned to the chest. He did not wear them to show off. He wore them because they reminded him of the people he had lost and the promises he had made to their memories. The great chamber looked different in daylight. The crystal walls caught the sun and threw rainbows across every surface. A long table had been set up in the center of the room with the treaty documents waiting. Nobles filled the seats on one side. The three humans took their places on the other. Queen entered last. She wore a gown of woven amber threads that made her look like a living statue of gold. The crown on her head sparkled like fire. She walked to her throne and sat down with the grace of someone born to rule. "Today we make history," she said. Her voice echoed through the chamber. "Today the Eye joined the galactic community. Today we become more than we were." She stood and walked to the treaty table. Daniel rose to meet her. They stood face to face, human and alien, two species about to bind their futures together. Then Queen did something that made every eye in the room gasp. She spoke in English, not through a translator, in actual broken, careful English. "Daniel Cole," she said slowly, each word clearly practiced 1,000 times. "I have learned your language, to show respect, to show that I and human can understand each other. Thank you for coming to my world." Daniel felt his eyes sting with unexpected emotion. Learning an alien language was incredibly difficult. The months of effort, the hours of practice, all just to speak a few sentences. It was the greatest honor anyone had ever shown him. "Queen," he replied, "you honor me and all of humanity. This kindness will never be forgotten." She clicked her mandibles in that alien smile and reached for the treaty. Her claw touched the paper, and that was when everything went wrong. The lights flickered and died. For a moment the chamber was pitch black, then emergency crystals glowed to life, casting everything in dim red light. Daniel heard screaming. He heard the sharp twang of bowstrings. He heard the whistle of arrows cutting through air. His body moved before his mind could catch up. Years of training took over. He grabbed Queen and threw her to the ground, covering her with his own body. Something punched into his back. Then again. Then again. Hot pain exploded through him, but he did not move. More arrows flew overhead. He heard Laura shouting and firing her weapon. He heard the crash of bodies hitting the floor. The screaming grew louder. Daniel looked up and saw chaos. Red-sashed warriors had replaced the loyal guards. They were everywhere, cutting down nobles and servants alike. Their spike bows fired crystalline arrows that shattered against the walls and found targets with deadly accuracy. An arrow slammed into Daniel's shoulder. Another hit his leg. He gritted his teeth and pressed his body harder against the queen beneath him. She was trembling, clicking in fear, trying to speak, but no words came out. "Stay down," Daniel growled. "Do not move." He reached for his sidearm with a hand slick with his own blood. His fingers found the grip. He pulled the weapon free and aimed at the nearest assassin. The gun kicked in his hand. The assassin fell. More arrows came. One grazed his head, leaving a line of fire across his scalp. Another buried itself in his hip. Daniel kept firing. Bodies fell, but more kept coming. He saw Laura on the ground, blood pooling beneath her, was crawling toward her, medical kit in hand, arrows flying over his head. The loyal Amber Guards were fighting back, but they were outnumbered and surprised. A massive eye stepped into Daniel's line of sight. This one wore armor over his crimson sash and carried a blade that gleamed like frozen blood. War Chief, the leader of the Crimson Hive, the architect of this massacre, looked at Daniel with something like confusion in his mirrored eyes. He clicked and buzzed, and the translator turned his words into cold English. "You protect her. You bleed for her. She is not your queen. She is not your hive. Why do you die for a stranger?" Daniel spat blood onto the crystal floor. 7 arrows stuck out of his body. His uniform was soaked in red. His vision was starting to blur at the edges, but he was still standing, still between the queen and her enemies. "Because that is what humans do," he said. "We protect the innocent. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. You want to kill her, you go through me first." Stared at him for a long moment. Then he raised his blade and stepped forward. But he never reached Daniel. A wave of amber-sashed guards crashed into his forces from a side door. Reinforcements had finally arrived. The battle turned. Red sashes began to fall. Looked at the changing tide of combat. He looked at Daniel, still standing despite wounds that should have killed him. And for the first time in his life, the war chief felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Not of the battle, not of death, but of these strange, soft creatures who refused to die when they should. "Retreat," ordered. "We leave now." The Crimson Warriors pulled back, fighting their way out through the windows and doors. In minutes they were gone, leaving behind the dead and the dying and one human who was slowly falling to his knees. Daniel felt his strength finally give out. The gun slipped from his fingers. The floor rushed up to meet him, but before he hit the ground, clawed hands caught him. Queen was holding him, cradling his broken body against her golden shell. "Why?" she asked in her careful English. Tears unlike any human tears fell from her compound eyes. "Why did you do this? You could have run. You could have lived." Daniel tried to smile, but his face would not cooperate. "Told you," he whispered. "That is what humans do." Then the darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. Queen would not let them take him from her arms. Her guards tried to lift Daniel's broken body, but she hissed at them with a fury that made warriors step back in fear. She carried him herself through the blood-stained halls of her palace, this human who weighed almost nothing compared to her ice strength. Price ran beside her, pressing bandages against wounds that would not stop bleeding. His hands were shaking. He had seen combat injuries before, but never like this. 7 crystalline arrows had found their marks in Daniel's body. Any one of them could be fatal. Together they should have been impossible to survive. "He needs surgery now," said. "Human surgery. I do not have the equipment." Queen clicked rapidly at her attendants. "Bring the healers, all of them. Bring everything we have. This human will not die. I forbid it." They reached the royal healing chambers. It was a room of soft light and strange machines that hummed with energy. Eye healers rushed in, their golden shells gleaming under the lights. They looked at Daniel's body and clicked in confusion. "We do not know human anatomy," the chief healer said. "We could kill him trying to save him." "Step forward. I will guide you. I will tell you what to do. Just give me the tools and follow my instructions." What followed was the longest night of Queen's life. She stood in the corner of the healing chamber, watching as her healers worked under direction. They pulled arrows from Daniel's flesh one by one. Each removal brought more blood, more damage, more reasons why this human should already be dead. But Daniel's heart kept beating. His lungs kept drawing breath. His body refused to surrender even when everything said it should. Laura limped into the chamber sometime near dawn. Her arm was in a sling and bandages covered half her face, but she was alive. She stood beside the Queen and watched the surgery in silence. "He has done this before," Laura said quietly. "Not this bad, but close. On New Bristol before I knew him, he carried 6 wounded civilians through enemy fire, took bullets in his back and legs. Doctors said he should have died. He was up and walking in 2 weeks." Queen turned her mirrored eyes toward the human woman. "Why? Why does he do these things?" Laura was quiet for a long moment. "He lost someone, a long time ago, someone he could not save. I think he has been trying to make up for that ever since. Every life he saves, every bullet he takes, it is for her, for the sister he could not protect." The surgery lasted 8 hours. When it was finally over, stepped back from the table, exhausted, covered in blood that was not his own. The chief healer clicked nervously and waited. "He is stable," said. "For now. The next few days will tell us if he survives." Queen moved to Daniel's side. His face was pale, so much paler than before. His breathing was shallow. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped and hummed. He looked small and fragile, this human who had stood against a storm of arrows like a mountain. She reached out with one careful claw and touched his hand. His skin was soft and warm despite everything. She had never touched a human before. She had never wanted to, but now she could not bring herself to pull away. "Leave us," she ordered. "All of you, I will watch over him." Her healers and attendants left. Laura hesitated at the door. "Call me if anything changes," she said. "Please." Queen nodded. Then she was alone with Daniel in the quiet room. She stayed with him for 3 days. Her advisors came and begged her to rest, to eat, to attend to matters of state. She sent them away. Her guards reported that War Chief had fled to the mountains, that his forces were scattered, that the assassination had failed utterly. She barely heard them. She watched Daniel breathe. She counted his heartbeats on the machines. She studied his scars, the old ones and the new ones, maps of violence written on his skin. Each one told a story she did not know. Each one was proof of pain she could not imagine. On the 3rd day, his eyes opened. At first, he did not seem to know where he was. His eyes moved around the room, confused, lost. Then they found her face and something in them changed. Recognition, then surprise. "You are still here," he whispered. His voice was rough like broken glass. "I never left," she replied in her careful English. Daniel tried to smile but winced instead. "How long?" 3 days. Your friend says you are very stubborn. He says you should have died 10 times by now." Daniel laughed weakly, then coughed. Pain crossed his face. "Sounds like." Queen leaned closer. The question she had been holding for 3 days finally broke free. "Why did you do it, Daniel? You owe me nothing. We are strangers. We are not even the same species. Why did you take those arrows from me?" Daniel was quiet for a long time. His eyes grew distant, looking at something she could not see. "I had a sister," he said finally. "Her name was Emma. She was the kindest person I ever knew. When our colony was attacked, I was not there to protect her. She died alone and afraid, and I was 3 star systems away, too far to help. I swore on her grave that I would never let another innocent person die if I could stop it. I do not care what species they are. I do not care if I know them or not. If someone needs protection and I can give it, I will. Every time. No matter what it costs." Queen felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth she had never experienced. Her kind did not understand sacrifice for strangers. The hive protected the hive. Blood protected blood. The idea that someone would die for a creature they had just met was beyond anything in history. "Your sister will be proud of you," she said. Daniel's eyes glistened with moisture. "I hope so." She stayed by his side for another week, watching him grow stronger day by day. They talked for hours about their worlds, their peoples, their dreams. She learned about Earth's blue oceans and green forests. He learned about crystal caves and amber rivers. And somewhere in those long conversations, something changed between them. Something neither of them had names for. Something that scared them both because it felt too big to understand. But for now, it was enough to sit together in the quiet room, two strangers from different worlds, learning that the universe was much smaller than they had ever believed. News of what happened in the Great Chamber spread across like fire through dry grass. At first the stories were confused and contradictory. Assassins had attacked. The Queen was dead. The Queen was alive. The humans had betrayed them. The humans had saved them. But slowly the truth emerged. A human had taken 7 arrows meant for Queen. A human had stood between her and death when her own guards had failed. A human had bled and nearly died for a queen who was not his queen, for a hive that was not his hive, for a species that was not his species. The Eye did not know what to do with this information. In every hive across the planet, debates raged in clicking tongues. The concept was so alien that many refused to believe it. Self-sacrifice for strangers went against everything the Eye understood about survival. Evolution had taught them that you protected your own genetic line, your own hive, your own blood. To die for an outsider was madness. But the evidence was undeniable. Hundreds had witnessed the attack. Thousands had seen Daniel carried from the chamber, his body broken and bleeding. And now word came that he was recovering, that the fragile human had refused to die despite wounds that would have killed any Eye. In the common districts, songs began to appear. Simple melodies at first, sung by workers and merchants who had never met a human. They called him the shield bearer. They called him the one. They called him he who stands between. Queen heard these songs from her chambers and felt her heart swell with an emotion she could not name. Daniel was walking now, slowly and painfully, but walking. Hovered over him constantly, checking vitals, changing bandages, worrying about infections. Laura had recovered enough to resume her security duties, though she never went far from Daniel's side. 3 weeks after the attack, Queen came to Daniel's room with a question she had been afraid to ask. "The treaty," she said, "do you still wish to sign it after what my people did to you?" Daniel looked at her with those strange round eyes that held no reflections. "Your people did not do this. War Chief did this. The Crimson Hive did this. You are not responsible for the actions of your enemies. But you almost died because of Eye politics. Your Earth Council would understand if you left, if you decided we were too dangerous to deal with." Daniel slowly stood from his chair. He winced but did not stop until he was face to face with her. "I did not come here to run away at the first sign of trouble. I came here to build a bridge between our peoples. That bridge does not break because of one attack. If anything, it makes me more certain that we need this alliance. Your people need to see that humans can be trusted, and my people need to see that the Eye are worth trusting." Queen stared at him for a long moment. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever treated her as an equal, as a partner, as something more than a political symbol. "You are a very strange creature, Daniel Cole." "So I have been told." That evening, a message arrived from the Jade Hive on the far side of the planet. Queen, ruler of the second largest hive, requested an audience with the human ambassador. She wanted to hear his story from his own lips. Over the following days, more messages came. The Silver Hive, the Azure Hive, the Onyx Hive. Queens from across wanted to meet the human who had bled for a stranger. For the first time in generations, the divided hives found something they could agree on. They were all curious about Daniel Cole. Laura shook her head when she heard the news. "You realize what you have done, right? You have become famous, on an alien planet, because you got shot full of arrows." Daniel laughed, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through his still healing wounds. "Not how I expected this mission to go." "Nothing ever goes the way you expect," said, checking Daniel's bandages for the 5th time that day. "But somehow you always end up covered in blood and surrounded by people who think you are a hero." "I am not a hero, I just did what anyone would do." Laura and exchanged a look. "No," Laura said quietly. "You did what you would do. Most people would have run. Most people would have saved themselves. You never even thought about it. You saw someone in danger and you moved. That is not normal, Daniel. That is something else entirely." Daniel did not know how to respond to that, so he said nothing. Queen visited him every evening. Sometimes they talked about politics and treaties. Sometimes they talked about their childhoods, their fears, their hopes. Daniel told her about growing up on a space station, about his mother who died when he was young, about his father who threw himself into work to forget his grief. Told him about the burden of being queen, about the loneliness of wearing a crown, about the 1,000 years of tradition that dictated every moment of her life. She had never been allowed to choose anything for herself. Her hive had chosen her food, her clothes, her words, her very thoughts. "Until you came," she said one night. "You chose to protect me. No one asked you to, no one ordered you to, you just chose, and that choice changed everything." Daniel reached out and took her clawed hand in his. It was a gesture that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Now it felt natural. "Choice is what makes us who we are," he said. "Duty is important. Tradition is important. But in the end, we are defined by the choices we make when no one is watching, when no one is telling us what to do. That is when we find out who we really are." His compound eyes reflected his face back at him. "And who are you, Daniel Cole?" He thought about the question for a long time. "I am someone who is trying very hard to be the person my sister believed I could be. Someone who protects the innocent. Someone who builds bridges instead of burning them. Someone who believes that the universe can be better than it is if we are all brave enough to make it so." That sounds very difficult. It is every day, but some things are worth being difficult. Squeezed his hand gently, careful not to hurt him with her claws. "I think I would like to be brave like you. I think I would like to learn how to choose." Daniel smiled. "Then I will teach you if you will let me." Outside the window, the purple sky had darkened into night. Stars appeared, strange and beautiful, witnesses to something new being born between two souls who had no right to find each other, but had found each other anyway. Tomorrow there would be ceremonies and politics and the hard work of building an alliance. But tonight there was only this. Two hands holding each other in the dark. Two hearts beating in rhythms that did not match but somehow still harmonized. And somewhere in the mountains, War Chief stared at reports of his crumbling support and felt the first cold touch of something he had never believed in. Defeat. The Grand Unity Hall was the largest structure on. It had been built 1,000 years ago by the first queens as a place where all hives could gather in peace. For centuries it had stood empty, a monument to a unity that never came. Today, for the first time in living memory, it was full. Queens from every hive sat in their designated sections: amber and crimson, jade and silver, azure and onyx. Their guards stood behind them in perfect rows. Their advisors whispered in their ears. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a blade. Daniel Cole walked into that room alone. He wore his formal uniform, cleaned and pressed, his medals polished to a shine. The scars on his face were still fresh, pink lines that traced the path of arrows. He walked slowly, his body still healing, but he walked with his head high and his shoulders back. He looked like a man who had stared death in the face and made it blink first. A ripple of clicking and buzzing spread through the hall. Every mirrored eye turned to watch him. This was the human. This was the shield bearer. This was the creature who had done the impossible. Queen rose from her throne as Daniel approached. She had never looked more beautiful, her bronze shell gleaming, her crown of crystal catching the light. She extended her hand and Daniel took it, and together they faced the assembled queens. "Sisters of the Hives," said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. "We gather here to witness something that has not happened in all of history. We gather to honor an outsider, a human, one who has earned a place among us through blood and sacrifice." She gestured and servants brought forward a golden bowl filled with sacred oils. The scent filled the air, sweet and ancient. "Daniel Cole," she continued, "you stood between me and death. You took wounds that should have killed you. You asked for nothing in return. By the ancient laws of our people, your scars are marks of honor equal to any warrior of the hives." She dipped her claw into the oil. "May I?" Daniel nodded. Reached forward and touched the scar on his face. Her claw traced its length, leaving a glistening line of oil. Then she moved to the next scar and the next, touching each wound with the sacred oil, marking them as badges of the highest honor. The queens of the other hives watched in stunned silence. This ritual had never been performed on an outsider. The oil was reserved for heroes of the hive, for warriors who had earned their scars in service to their queen. To grant it to a human was unthinkable. And yet, as traced each scar, it began to feel not unthinkable but inevitable. The human had earned this. The The human had bled for it. The scars did not lie. When she finished, turned to face the assembly once more. I named Daniel Cole shield bearer of the Amber Hive. He shall have the right to stand at my side in any battle. He shall have the right to speak in any council. He shall be one of us in all ways that matter. A murmur ran through the hall. Some of the queens nodded in approval. Others looked uncertain, but none objected. Then a door opened at the far end of the hall, and War Chief walked in. He was alone, without guards or weapons. His crimson sash hung loose around his waist. His shell was dull, unhealthy, the look of someone who had not slept in days. He walked down the center of the hall until he stood before Queen and Daniel. "I come to surrender," he said. His voice was empty, defeated. "My forces have abandoned me. My supporters have fled. I am alone." His mandibles clicked in cold anger. "You tried to kill me. You wounded many of my people. You nearly killed a guest of my hive. Why should I not have you executed where you stand?" Looked at Daniel. For a long moment, the two of them stared at each other in silence. "Because he would not want you to," said quietly. "I saw him in the chamber. He could have killed me when he had the chance. He chose to protect instead of destroy. I did not understand it then. I'm not sure I understand it now. But I know that killing me would be the wrong choice, and I think he knows it too." All eyes turned to Daniel. The fate of the War Chief rested in his hands. One word and would die. Daniel thought about it. He thought about the arrows in his back. He thought about the pain and the blood and the weeks of recovery. He thought about how easy it would be to say yes, to watch die, to feel something like justice. But then he thought about Emma. His sister would not have wanted revenge. She would have wanted peace. "Spare him," Daniel said. "Let him serve in the rebuilding. Let him see what unity can accomplish. That will be a greater punishment than death." Bowed his head. Something like gratitude flickered in his mirrored eyes. Queen turned to the assembled queens. "You have heard the shield bearer's judgment. War Chief will live, but he will serve. Does anyone object?" Silence, no one spoke. Nodded. "Then let us speak of the future. Today the Amber Hive signs an alliance with humanity. But I ask my sister queens, will you join us? Will you put aside old conflicts and step forward into something new?" One by one, the queens rose from their thrones. The Queen of Jade, the Queen of Silver, the Queen of Azure. One by one, they walked forward until they stood in a circle around Daniel and "We will join," they said, each in turn. "For the future, for our children, for the stars we have not yet seen." The treaty was signed that day by every hive on. It was the first unified action in history, and at the center of it all stood a single human, covered in scars, smiling through his pain. The ceremony ended. The queens departed. The hall slowly emptied until only Daniel and remained, standing in the fading light. "What happens now?" Daniel asked. "Now you go home," said. "Back to Earth, back to your people. You will be a hero there too, I think." "And you?" She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "I will be here being a queen, doing my duty, missing you." Daniel stepped closer. "I do not want to leave." "You must. Your people need you. The Alliance needs you out there, speaking for both our kinds." "Then I will come back, as soon as I can, as often as I can." Turned to face him. Her compound eyes reflected his image back at him 1,000 times. "Promise me." "I promise." She reached out and touched the scars on his face one last time. "Every one of these was earned protecting me. Every one of them is sacred. Do not let anyone tell you they are ugly. They are the most beautiful things I have ever seen." Daniel leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture of closeness that felt natural despite their differences. "I will wear them with pride, always." The human delegation departed the next morning. Daniel stood at the window of the shuttle as it rose into the purple sky, watching the crystal spires shrink below him. Somewhere down there, a queen stood on her balcony, watching him go. 6 months later, a message arrived on Earth. It came through official channels but was marked personal. It was from Queen of the Amber Hive. It contained only 3 words, translated from I choose you." Daniel read the message. He read it again. He smiled so wide that his scars ached. Then he walked to his commander's office and requested a permanent posting too. There was, he explained, unfinished diplomatic business that required his personal attention. His request was granted. And far across the stars, on a planet of crystal and amber, a queen looked up at the sky and felt something she had never felt before. Hope. The kind of hope that comes when you know with absolute certainty that someone is coming home to you. The kind of hope that can change worlds. The kind of hope that humans carry with them wherever they go, bright and unbreakable. A gift to a universe that needs it more than it knows.